Imagine a beam of light passing through a window at night, the air full of fine dust you can finally see because a lamp happened to be on in the next room. The particles hang there like a private constellation, moving so slowly you could believe time has loosened its grip. Now, picture your gaze, the simple act of noticing changing the quality of that scene. The light is the same, the dust is the same, and still something has shifted because you are here watching. The question that reaches for you is quiet, almost shy. What if attention bends the world, the way gravity bends light? We are taught that gravity is the soft insistence of mass on the fabric of space, the way a planet makes a bowl and a moon learns to circle. But there is another force we live inside without naming it: the pull of awareness. The room you inhabit becomes a room because you allow its edges to assemble. The hum of an appliance, the slightly sweet scent of paper, the weighting of your own hands. None of it fully exists until your noticing gathers it. This isn't mysticism. It is the lived physics of being awake. In the laboratory, observation collapses a cloud of maybes into a single yes. In the small laboratory of a night like this, your attention collapses a crowd of distractions into a felt presence, and suddenly the world has weight. There's a paradox to this. We think of attention as bright and narrow, like a flashlight beam hunting through a dark attic. But the most revealing attention is often the opposite: warm, diffused, open. It is the glow a candle gives a room, not to expose, but to soften and reveal the contours we missed. When that kind of attention arrives, the noise of things falls away, and what remains has a surprising gravity. A face becomes a constellation of meanings. A memory becomes a turning point. A single breath becomes a shoreline where time breaks and gathers again. Light, in the language of science, behaves as both particle and wave. You might think of your awareness in the same dual manner. Some moments call you to touch a point, this voice, this sentence, this flicker of thought. Other moments invite you to feel the field, the emotional climate around your decisions, the unspoken tone of a room, the slow tide of a relationship as it recedes and returns. Particle and wave, focus and field. When attention moves with both behaviors at once, life feels coherent, the way music feels coherent when rhythm and melody stop competing and begin to lean on each other. Consider a small example. You notice the shape of your keys on the table, the coolness of metal after the night air. That is particle crisp exact. In the same instant, you sense the entire evening as a gentle aftertaste. The conversations, the laughter that arrived late, the quiet relief of coming home. That is, waves surrounding continuous. Nothing supernatural is required. Yet something unmistakable happens when both layers are held together by steady noticing. The evening makes sense in your body. It comes to rest. Coherence, not as a theory but as a felt arrangement of experience. Perhaps that is what we mean when we say attention becomes gravity. It is not that awareness manufactures reality out of nothing. It is that awareness selects which of the many possible meanings will settle, the way planets accrete from dust when a center of pull appears. Where you look becomes where the pieces gather. And where pieces gather, time thickens. A moment grows long legs. A choice refuses to remain small. You can feel the pull in the simplest of places, between two words that almost contradict each other, between standing and sitting, between telling a story and allowing a silence to say it better. There is a kindness in this. When attention bends around a moment, it gives shelter. A difficult feeling becomes containable, like rain collecting in a bowl rather than soaking everything. A fragile joy becomes less fragile because you've given it sides to lean on. Even memory notices and adjusts. The past is not merely what happened, it is what you continue to give weight to. In this way, noticing is not passive. It is a quiet form of shaping an artisan's hand that leaves no fingerprints yet changes the curve. If you are listening now in a place that is dim and still, you might sense the room bending toward you just slightly, as if acknowledging your presence. The air grows articulate. The ordinary grows precise. What you call you becomes a doorway rather than a destination, something light can pass through, and emerge altered. And yet there is a mystery we haven't touched. If attention can shape the felt world, what shapes attention? What is the gentle hand that turns the lens that decides which possibilities will drift apart and which will fall together and become real? Hold that question without rushing it. Let it rest inside the image that opened this night dust floating in a beam, a quiet observer, a room that feels newly assembled. Somewhere just beyond the edge of your hearing, another story is preparing itself, the story of how observation and reality meet in a dance of coherence and noise of waves collapsing and reforming. The lamp is still on. The particles are still moving. And the beam, faint and steady, is about to show you something you have felt all your life, but never named. Imagine for a moment a lake at night. The surface looks black until the moon rises and lays a silver path across it. Nothing in the water has changed. The path is not a bridge you could walk. It appears because of angle, reflection, and perspective. Observation, for all its poetry, is a geometry. In physics, when a wave is measured, possibilities untangle and take on definite roles. In lived experience, when a moment is truly noticed, scattered impressions settle into a pattern that feels trustworthy. The wave becomes a syllable. The syllable becomes meaning. Meaning acquires weight, and weight invites orbits. We have many names for this settling. Coherence is one of them. In laboratories, coherence describes the phase alignment of waves, the way peaks and troughs learn to agree. In a life, coherence is the felt experience of your days, learning to agree with your values, your breath, learning to agree with your pacing, your relationships, learning to agree with what you quietly know is true. It's remarkable how quickly the world behaves differently when the patterns you carry inside begin to resonate with the pattern in front of you. You step into a conversation, and the words that could have scattered instead gather around a center you didn't need to announce. Consider breath, the oldest instrument you own. It has a wave structure, inhalation as crest, exhalation as trough, the small pause between them as a shoreline, where both are briefly true. When your attention rests on that rhythm without trying to fix it, the body often finds coherence on its own. Heartbeats and breath drift into a gentle partnership, and the inner noise that used to flood the room eases back. In that ease, perception becomes more discriminating. You notice tone as well as content, pause as well as speech, the slight widening of another person's eyes just before they decide to share something real. Your observation doesn't force anything, it invites. And invitation has its own kind of gravity. Now let's trace that gravity through time. Time, as most of us experience it, is a sequence we walk across one wooden plank at a time. But every so often we feel the boards flex together under our weight, and the path becomes a single piece. The memory of a choice you made years ago speaks to the choice you face now. The future you imagine sends a faint echo backward. Past, present, and possibility align for a few breaths and create a corridor. This is not a trick of wishful thinking. It's a pattern recognition event. The brain, always hungry for coherence, hears a chord and realizes the notes belong together. When attention is steady, the chord sustains. When attention is scattered, the sound dissolves, and we are left with isolated notes that feel like separate problems. Wave. Particle duality has something to teach here. A particle is a point you can name. A wave is a spread you can sense. Your life has both. Decisions ask for particle clarity, this word or that one, this door or the other. Longings ask for wave sensitivity, the climate of a home rather than its floor plan, the emotional landscape of a season rather than its calendar. Attention navigates both domains. It does so not by narrowing or widening alone, but by changing its posture to the question at hand. Sometimes you look through a keyhole, sometimes you listen with the whole wall. Think of memory as a field, not a filing cabinet, not a stack of photographs, but a field whose shape is influenced by where you stand. Walk to the edge of regret, and the wind changes. Walk to the hill of gratitude, and distance looks different. In physics, a field is a region where each point has a value, a temperature, a force, a direction. In you, memory is a region where each point has a feeling. That feeling is not fixed. It can be reweighted. A memory that used to anchor you in shame can become an anchor in humility. A memory that used to inflate you can become a reminder to meet others gently. The field updates when attention lingers long enough to let the old meaning exhale. Here's the strange part. The world answers. You change nothing visible, no scripts, no circumstances, and still the tone of ordinary exchanges begins to soften. You run into a neighbor and the hurried small talk unexpectedly makes room for a real sentence. A project that felt like pushing a heavy door finally swings because the hinges have been oiled by the way you're holding it, not by any new effort. In scientific language, we might say that your internal phase has aligned with the task's phase, reducing destructive interference. In simpler terms, what matters stops canceling itself. Attention also has a directionality. It can move outward like a beam, illuminating whatever it touches. It can also move inward like a tide, revealing the contours of your own shoreline. Outward attention finds facts, patterns, and possibilities. Inward attention finds motives, fears, and quiet strengths. Neither is superior. They are two halves of a seeing that becomes trustworthy only when they speak to each other. When outward observation discovers a difficult truth, inward observation can offer a chair. When inward observation discovers a raw place, outward observation can bring a window. Together they make a room where reality is welcome. Choice is where this all turns practical without becoming prescriptive. A choice, at the level that matters, is not a transaction between options. It is a moment when your wave self and particle self negotiate their alignment. There is the crispness of the decision, and there is the climate of the person who will have to live inside that decision when the crispness fades. When those two recognize each other, the yes or the no carries a different density. You can feel it in your shoulders. You can hear it in the way you end a sentence. Coherence is audible. Of course, coherence is not a permanent state. Even in a laboratory, coherence is delicate. Interference, temperature, and stray interactions cause decoherence, the collapse of harmonized waves back into a noisy crowd. Life has its own version of stray interactions. A sharp notification, a half-remembered worry, the cultural static that urges speed for speed's sake. These are small collisions that jostle the alignment you cultivated 5 breaths ago. And yet even here, attention behaves like gravity. It doesn't erase interruptions, it gathers them, it gives them an orbit. The noise can become a satellite instead of a storm. This is the point in the lake where the silver path trembles. A breeze, almost nothing, touches the surface, and the line breaks into a scatter of bright coins. Beautiful still, but harder to follow. We know this sensation. The day or night is moving well, and a small gust catches us. The thread thins. Focus becomes effort. Meaning feels like something we are chasing with a net that has mended and torn places. You can almost hear the water asking, what is the difference between a breeze that refreshes and a gust that erases the path? Hold that question gently. We've traced how attention bends experience toward coherence, how wave and particle harmonize in the mind and in the body, how memory is not fixed, but field-like and responsive. And yet there are forces that resist alignment, that scatter and blur, that make the beam feel less like a path and more like a swarm. Those forces are not enemies. They are teachers of a different sort. If gravity is the invitation, noise is the test of sincerity. In the distance, the wind rises just enough to wrinkle the lake again, and another pattern appears, one we're about to enter, where distraction and coherence meet at the thin border of a choice that doesn't announce itself until you're standing in it. There is a small kitchen, late and quiet. The hum of the refrigerator is a low shoreline, steady enough that you stop hearing it until the moment you listen. A mug waits near the sink, ringed with a faint circle from earlier, like an eclipse in miniature. One lamp is on above the stove, honey-colored, making the metal fixtures look older than they are. If a camera were placed on the shelf, it would catch almost nothing. No movement, no event, only a person leaning on the counter with the kind of stillness that earns its shape. You can smell citrus where a slice was pressed. You can feel the cool tile through your forearms. The room seems unimportant, and yet it keeps widening, as if a field were opening inside it. The central image arrives without drama, a glass of water set down carefully in the circle of light. The surface takes the lamp and turns it into a trembling coin. Your hand hovers above the rim, and you notice the faint warmth radiating from your skin. Steam would be visible if this were tea, but the water is plain and clear, a liquid mirror holding a small, patient sky. You are not trying to think. Attention isn't hunting, it is settling. The phrase that rises unsummoned is simple and almost too soft to hear. Let it gather, let it gather. The words move like a boat, without wake threading one sense to another. They do not instruct, they acknowledge. The room acknowledges back. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard yields a quiet syllable of wood to wood. Somewhere in the body, a breath completes itself, not deeper, not special, just complete. The glass reflects your fingers, and for a moment you see your hand, as if it belongs to someone you love. The gentleness you would extend to them arrives here unannounced, and the water brightens with it. You remember the lake from earlier, the silver path on black water. Here the path is a ring in a kitchen lamp, a circle that makes a promise to hold things. There had been a conversation tonight, or perhaps a dozen small conversations threaded into one, and somewhere inside them was a sentence that snagged. Not hostile, not even unkind, just a knot. The knot traveled home with you. It sat in the passenger seat. It stood in the doorway. It followed you to the sink and waited on the counter beside the glass. You didn't invite it, but notice this. By refusing to push it away, you gave it gravity. You gave it an orbit. It stops clattering in the background and begins to circle where you can see it. The knot is not a villain. It is a messenger with bad timing. You watch it from the corner of your mind, the way you would watch a moth brush the edge of a lampshade and settle. The kitchen holds the scene like a steady palm. Nothing in the outer frame needs to change. Inside the frame, meaning turns slow as a planet taking its time to reveal the weather on its far side. It occurs to you that presence is less about solving and more about allowing a pattern to finish telling the truth it contains. The glass waits, and so do you. Coherence is audible. You hear it now, in the way silence has texture. The refrigerator hum stops being a drone and becomes a tone with layer and grain. The clock that you usually ignore makes a soft, asymmetrical tick, and in between two ticks, there is a room you can step into. A phrase returns, sanding its corners as it comes back. Let it gather. In the return, it becomes less a statement and more a field. The knot loosens by half a turn, then by another half. Each shift is almost invisible. Not an event you could post or announce, but a status change registered by the part of you that knows when a storm moves offshore. There is the taste of the water when you finally lift the glass. Cold, yes, but also fuller than cold mineral air. A faint sweetness that is not sugar, but something like relief. The rim touches your lip, and you realize the distance between your face and this small circle of light is exactly the distance required for the world to refocus. What was pressing becomes dimensional. What was flat grows a back and a side. You aren't conquering anything. You are allowing it to land. From the window above the sink, a faint outline of branches reaches into the night. The leaves are motionless, or maybe they move so slightly that only their shadow moves. Your reflection is part of the pane but not centered. It drifts to the left as if making room for the outside to speak. And in that sharing, an old fear appears. A quiet, familiar one, that if you soften your gaze, you'll miss what matters. If you open too widely, you'll lose the thread. The fear is understandable. Attention has been trained to be a blade when a cup would do. The refrain brushes past again, no louder than a sleeve against a doorframe. Let it gather. The sentence sits beside the fear without arguing. Together they create the smallest weather system. Gentle pressure drops. A breeze moves through the kitchen that is not wind but recognition. Somewhere inside your ribs, a room you didn't know was locked clicks open. The knot on the counter lifts and settles again, less tightly wound, like twine that has learned it is still useful, even when not binding anything. If we could map the moment, it would look simple. One person, one glass, one lamp, a hush. But the inner map would be star-thick. A memory aligns with a value aligns with a tone. The tone aligns with a choice that is not made tonight, yet begins to find its center of gravity. Nothing needs to be decided. The deciding is already turning in a wider orbit, learning the path it will take. This is attention, as gravity unforced, steady, patient enough to wait for the pieces to come home. You set the glass down and watch the surface still itself. The coin of light becomes a mirror again, then a coin, then a mirror, as if it can't decide which story to tell. You don't force the decision. You simply stay long enough for the quiet to keep speaking, and somewhere near the edge of the scene a new sound gathers, distant at first, then nearer, the kind of rustle that means other forces are approaching, not to break what's been made but to test its shape. The kitchen breathes with you. The water holds the lamp, and just beyond the doorway the wind thinks about moving. The kitchen fades, and the scene widens to the quiet hum of a city at night. Windows glitter like cells in a great sleepless organism. Each one holds a different pulse, a conversation, spilling laughter, a glow of screens, someone sitting motionless in the faint blue light of an unfinished thought. From above, the pattern looks beautiful, random, yes, but rhythmic in its own disorder. From within, it can feel like drowning in frequencies that never quite align. This is the age of endless signals. Attention, once a steady current, now feels more like static. Everything calls to be noticed. Nothing lingers long enough to matter. You scroll, you glance, you absorb, and the impressions slide past each other like overlapping waves, each carrying energy, none forming a clear picture. Scientists call this interference. When waves meet out of phase, their peaks cancel, and silence replaces sound. In your inner life, interference looks like that familiar numbness, too many inputs fighting for the same space, their meanings dissolving each other before they can land. In a quantum experiment, decoherence occurs when a system loses its delicate isolation. The once coherent wave collapses into noise because it interacts too much with its environment. A single particle can no longer hold its mystery. It must declare a side, this path or that. Something similar happens in us. We are constantly interacting with every emotional field around us. News, headlines, subtle judgments, digital flickers, unspoken expectations, each one a collision, each one demanding collapse. The result isn't catastrophe, it's fatigue, the silent kind that doesn't ask for rest but for depth. The strange part is that we often mistake movement for meaning. We tap, swipe, reply, refresh, thinking the acceleration will compensate for the absence of gravity. But gravity isn't speed, it's pull. It's what keeps the orbit from spinning apart. The more we chase coherence through motion, the more we slip into orbitless drift. The world spins beautifully, but without the anchor of sustained noticing, even beauty becomes frictionless. Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded station. Thousands of feet moving, announcements echoing from invisible corners, lights flashing names of places you'll never go. You look up at the schedule board, and for a second all the letters blur. They don't just blur visually, they blur meaning. Each destination becomes the same destination elsewhere. That's what decoherence feels like from the inside, the loss of distinguishable form. Awareness still functions, but without an organizing center, experience becomes weightless, too slippery to hold. And yet something within us resists total noise. A faint pull begins small but unmistakable. It's the pull of coherence, calling to be restored. A child's laugh from somewhere behind the crowd. A color that doesn't belong in this palette of metal and neon. The smell of rain sneaking through vents. These are not dramatic signals. They are phase reminders, brief moments where reality reintroduces its rhythm. The mind catches one, and suddenly remembers its shape. You inhale, and the station reforms. You are not a particle lost among collisions. You are a wave remembering its frequency. Attention, when diffused, doesn't vanish. It simply waits. Even the most distracted mind is still capable of resonance. The physics of coherence teaches that when enough waves align, even weak ones, they amplify each other until a signal emerges above the noise. You've seen this happen on an emotional scale. One genuine conversation after a long chain of shallow exchanges. One still morning after weeks of rush. One unguarded moment of honesty that recalibrates everything. It's not that life suddenly improved. It's that coherence returned your inner field, found a reference point again. Still, we often fight noise by building thicker walls. We isolate, we filter, we withdraw, thinking silence must mean stillness. But isolation is not coherence. It's just another form of interference, one that cancels from the inside. In physics, perfect isolation kills interaction. In life, it kills warmth. Coherence needs contact, it just needs rhythm in that contact. Two instruments can play at once and still sound beautiful, but only if they agree on time. The world doesn't need to be quiet. It needs to be tuned. Here's the counterpoint. What if the noise itself is part of the music? What if distraction in its messy abundance is the universe, rehearsing variety, each tone looking for harmony, each interruption asking for integration? The goal isn't to silence the noise, but to understand the way it outlines the signal. You don't remove every wave that isn't in tune. You listen for where they overlap, where the hum deepens, rather than clashes. In the chaos of a crowded world, there are notes that only exist because of interference. The beauty of a chord is that no single frequency owns it. So maybe attention doesn't fail when it's scattered. Maybe it's simply learning the edges of its influence, testing how far gravity can reach before coherence dissolves. Maybe the discomfort of modern overstimulation is the creative friction of a system rebalancing itself, asking what is the shape of meaning when there's too much to hold. The answer might not be found in silence, but in the way silence re-enters the noise like an old friend returning to the party, not to stop the music, but to remind it of rhythm. Imagine once more the lake from earlier, no longer calm but shivering with wind. Each ripple catches light, sending thousands of broken paths across the surface. From up close, the reflection looks ruined. Nothing holds still long enough to mirror the moon. But step back, and a strange thing happens. The motion itself becomes coherence. The waves, though chaotic, share direction. The moon doesn't disappear. It multiplies. There isn't one reflection anymore, but a field of them, each incomplete, all together forming something whole. In quantum theory, coherence can re-emerge after apparent loss. Under the right conditions, scattered waves realign. Particles that seemed random reveal correlation. Life, too, has its revival states. A heart once overwhelmed can regain rhythm. A mind once scattered can rediscover its pull. The key is not force but resonance, recognizing the subtle invitations that reality keeps offering, even through distraction. Every noise hides a pulse. Every chaos hides an interval. And if attention truly behaves like gravity, then no lost moment is wasted. Every fragment still circles the center, waiting to fall back into alignment. The challenge is not to eliminate interference, but to stay near enough to the field that coherence remains possible. Somewhere, just beyond hearing the hum of your own, noticing still vibrates. It's not gone. It's orbiting. Listen. There it is again, the refrigerator's tone from that earlier kitchen. The pulse of the city now softened into one long breath. The waves have traveled far but not apart. A small echo begins to form, gathering what the wind had scattered. You can almost see it, patterns learning how to return gravity, reclaiming its pull, and attention beginning to bend the world back toward meaning. And yet something deeper waits beneath this restoration. Something more intimate than coherence. More mysterious than distraction. What is the self that experiences these fluctuations? What part of you decides where gravity will point? If awareness shapes the world, who shapes awareness? The question hangs there. weightless, but magnetic, drawing us closer to the heart of the field where perception and being become the same thing, and the next breath feels like it might answer. We've watched attention gather the world the way gravity gathers dust, watched coherence return after a scatter of noise, watched a kitchen become a field, and a city soften into one long breath. But a deeper inquiry waits beneath these images, patient as a river rock. What is the you that notices? Noticing, what is the clear surface on which the reflections appear? If attention has weight, where does that weight come from? There is a rock, moment often missed when you sense you could look here or there. That fork is not yet a decision. It's more like a hinge where possibility touches preference. The self that stands at that hinge is quieter than the voice that narrates your day. It's quieter than mood, quieter than opinion. It resembles a listening more than a persona, a transparent capacity more than a performance. You feel it most clearly when speech would be too loud, when the right response is simply to witness something finish becoming itself. This is the part of you that can sit beside joy without grabbing it, and beside sorrow without collapsing. If attention is gravity, this is the curve of space in which that gravity operates the unshowy geometry of presence. Physics offers an image with surprising intimacy. In general, relativity mass tells space-time how to curve, and curved space-time tells mass how to move. Light, which has no rest, mass still follows those curves. When a massive object sits between us and a distant galaxy, its gravity bends the passing light, magnifying or splitting the image. Astronomers call this gravitational lensing. It's not that the galaxy changes. It is the path of its light that changes through the shaped field. You can feel the analogy. Forming the world's events are the galaxy. Attention is the shaped field. Awareness is the underlying space. Meaning, like light, follows the curve. In a day that includes 1,000 small collisions, your internal landscape becomes the lens. A tense memory thickens the field and bends incoming experience toward caution. A quiet confidence softens the curvature and lets the same events arrive without distortion. None of this is mystical. It's the psychology we already know spoken in the poetry of physics. And here is where the inquiry becomes both humbling and liberating. You are not only the attention that bends, you are also the space that allows bending to happen, the room in which the lens sits, the sky in which the galaxy appears. The more deeply this is felt, the less you need to force coherence, because the space itself is coherent. Notice how this reframes choice. We tend to treat choices as verdicts delivered by a judge who must always be right. But if awareness is a field and attention is its local gravity, then choices are ways of gently adjusting curvature. A word chosen with care changes the path of a conversation. A pause changes the path of a thought. An apology sincerely formed changes the path of a memory as it travels into the future. None of these actions require domination. They require an intimacy with the field, the kind you recognized in the kitchen when the knot loosened without argument. There's an old frustration that rises here. If so much depends on how we hold a moment, why is it so easy to lose the thread? Perhaps because the self that notices is layered. One layer loves certainty. Another loves truth even when it's uncertain. One layer loves speed. Another loves the way meaning ripens when left on the vine a little longer. When the quicker layer takes the wheel, attention narrows to a blade, and the world bleeds details. When the deeper layer is given the room to breathe, attention widens to a cup, and the world pours itself without spilling. Neither mode is wrong. It is the unconscious swinging between them that tires us. What relieves the swing is the recognition, felt not forced, that the space behind both modes is the same. A small thought experiment. Picture two people reading the same note from a friend. Let's talk. The words are identical. The light departing the galaxy is the same. For the first person, the inner field is curved by old fears, and the phrase bends into threat. For the second, the field is curved by trust, and the phrase bends into invitation. The meaning that reaches the mind is shaped by the lens. We do this all day, bend light without noticing that we are bending it. To sense the lens is to regain a kindness toward yourself and others. Of course they saw it that way. Their field is shaped by weather you don't see. Of course you saw it this way. Your field is shaped by weather you can finally name. Sometimes a single line can hold an entire practice without sounding like one. Here is the replay line. The evening has been making quietly and steadily across every image we've visited. Attention is the gravity of meaning. It does not command. It gathers. When that sentence returns, it's not a slogan. It's a reminder of a physics you already live by. Where attention rests, reality gathers. Where it withholds reality, remains a thin mist that never quite becomes water. And yet there is tenderness in admitting that not everything should gather. Some experiences pass like comets, brilliant, brief, never meant to become furniture. Part of wisdom is sensing what to give orbit and what to let streak across the sky unclaimed. The kitchen knot deserved an orbit long enough to unspool. The passing irritations did not. A life grows elegant when the field learns these distinctions by feel, not by rule. If this seems abstract, return to concrete textures. The ring of light on the glass, the shadow of branches at the window, the hum of a city reduced to one breath. These are not decorations. They are the touch points that keep the philosophy from floating away. They remind you that awareness is not an idea you think. It is a way of being in contact with what is here. Each time you feel the weight of a cup or the cadence of a voice you love, the field clarifies. The lens polishes itself by touching the world it bends. A final thought, clean as morning air, the part of you that notices is not exhausted by noticing. Exhaustion comes from the friction of pretending to be smaller than the space you are. When you let awareness be spacious, attention can do its gentle work without burning itself into a point. Curvature becomes natural, meaning flows along its paths without cajoling. The world starts to look less like a test and more like a conversation between light and field. Hold this image as we move the galaxy, sending its light, the lens curving the path, the observer receiving a scene, shaped but not falsified. We do this with every glance, every word, every breath that lingers long enough to reveal its own coherence. And just at the edge of this understanding, right where the replay line continues to echo, another door is opening. It leads not into theory, but into the dailiness of things, the ways we greet each other, the choices we make when no one is looking, the subtle invitations we offer and accept. The question waiting there is gentle and practical. If meaning follows the curve you hold, what kind of curve will you bring to the moments about to arrive? Morning or midnight, the world approaches in small deliveries. A door clicks, a spoon rests against a plate, a voice you know by heart speaks your name in a way that tells you everything before the sentence arrives. The images we've carried, light-bending fields, curving coherence gathering, were never meant to hover above life. They want to sit beside your shoes near the threshold, to become the way you step through an ordinary day. Picture the hallway you walk most often. There is a squeak near the third board. There is a picture frame that tilts by a degree and has to be reminded to be square. These are small truths, but they embody a larger one. Attention learns a place the way hands learn a tool. The longer you live with something, the more precisely you hold it. Meaning, too, becomes ergonomic. When you meet a friend, your field curves toward care before any words pass between you. When a difficult memory returns, you feel the old gravity rise, but not as a trap, as a weather pattern you now recognize with an umbrella already by the door. In the office, in the workshop, in the quiet room where you put thoughts into order, gravity is choice written in tone. You open a message. The first reading bends toward hurry. The second, taken a breath, later bends toward nuance. The words on the screen do not change, but the lens does, and with it the world that enters. A conversation lands differently when you allow it to arrive through the curvature of listening. Something that would have been answered too quickly gets time to show its second meaning. Often, that is where the real human sits, between first meaning and second waiting to be seen. Relationships are where these micro-curvatures matter. We imagine love as grand gestures, but most of its architecture is made of small adjustments to the field. A pause before speaking, a gentler edge on a question, the way you set your voice down so the other person's voice has a place to rest. Coherence becomes communal. Two lenses align, and suddenly light that would have scattered turns into a path both can follow. In that path, conflict doesn't vanish. It clarifies. You can disagree without disowning each other. Gravity holds the orbit while the weather changes. Even the way you greet your own thoughts takes on new weight. A plan arrives with sharp angles. You smooth them by checking the fit against your deeper climate. A worry arrives at midnight. You give it a chair and water, not to encourage it but to keep it from banging pots in the kitchen. This is not technique. It is temperament learned through contact. The quiet confidence that awareness is wide enough to cradle what it does not yet understand. When attention is a cup, not a blade, even confusion becomes informative. It tells you where the field wants to curve next. Out in the world, the signals pile up. Headlines hum with urgency. Opinions ask for speed. You move through it differently now. Not slower necessarily, but curved toward relevance. You notice the one fact that matters and let it anchor the rest, the way a single star can steady a traveler. You recognize noise as part of the music and listen for the note that deepens the chord. And when no note appears, you're willing to wait. Gravity is patient, meaning grows legs when not rushed. Return for a last time to the kitchen with the lamp and the glass. The coin of light is less a symbol now and more a friend. You know how to meet the night without asking it to be morning. You know how to let a knot unwind without pulling at it with names. If a decision stands in the doorway, you greet it not as a verdict, but as a path that will inherit your posture. Choices like light will follow the curve you hold. And the curve you hold is shaped by a presence that doesn't need to be dramatic to be decisive. There is one insight that wants to linger. As the room dims, attention is the gravity of meaning, and awareness is the space that gives gravity its home. This is less a sentence to remember than a way to meet the next 5 minutes. When someone you love speaks, let the field curve toward care. When you speak, let your words travel a path that keeps coherence intact. When the world rushes you, let the lens widen until rush becomes a smaller part of a larger weather. None of this demands effort for its own sake. It asks only for contact, the kind that allows what is already true to organize itself. And here is the open question to carry with you, simple enough to fit in a pocket, generous enough to keep unfolding. If light bends through the field you hold, what world do you want your next glance to make visible? If a line stayed with you, share it in the comments. Your words might be the mirror someone needs tonight. Then let the lamp be a lamp, the glass be a glass, and your quiet noticing be the curve where the ordinary keeps becoming luminous, one unforced breath at a time.